This is America on the Road, winner of the International Automotive Media Conference Gold Medal Award for Radio, and now in its 24th year on the air. Thanks for being with us as we bring you the latest automotive information from around the world. Major automaker has just announced an exciting cross between a compact SUV and a pickup truck. And I was there for the global debut, so I'll be sharing what I learned there. America on the Road is brought to you by Mercury Insurance and DrivingToday.com. If you're looking to save some money, you should switch to Mercury for your auto and home insurance. Californians save an average of $670 with Mercury, so imagine how much you could save. Get a quote today at mercuryinsurance.com. Hi, I'm Jack Nered. With me is co-host Chris Teague. Chris, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing quite well today, Jack. Enjoying some nice weather and getting some work done. How about you?
Yeah, very good. This is my first assignment of the day. We're recording this fairly early in the morning in Southern California. You're in the late morning there in Maine, but we're doing the show cross country as we typically do, and it's seeming to work out well. So I'm glad things are going well in Maine, and spring is springing up for around you, I guess.
Yes, it's always fun to wake you up early in the morning for a podcast, but yeah, spring is here.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how able to do this I am. I'm probably okay. We'll see. You can be the judge. This week, our special guest is Mike Darrow. He is president and CEO of TrueCar. And they're, of course, an auto information and buying site. They've improved what they've been doing over the last several months. They're changing things around a little bit, and we'll talk with Mike about that. Great resource, TrueCar. In the road test segment, Chris will take a detailed look at the 2021 Ford Bronco Sport. Any little hint as to how your review is going to go, Chris?
My opinion changed about halfway through the week for the better. I'll leave it there.
Okay. Interesting. So I want to hear that, and I think others will want to hear that too. I'll be talking about the Acura MDX. It's a 2022 model sitting in my driveway right now. One of America's most popular luxury three-row vehicles, all new for 2022. And so we'll take a deep dive into that. But before we do any of that, we'll get into the automotive news from this week. And one big piece of automotive news I was on the ground for. I was on the ground in Tucson, Arizona, actually driving the Hyundai Tucson as part of a large press contingent, when Hyundai showed us the brand new Santa Cruz compact pickup truck, although I'm not certain that's exactly the way to describe it. It's one of those vehicles that really doesn't have a proper moniker, as they say. You can describe something as a compact sport utility or a compact truck or mid-sized truck or a sedan or whatever. This is a cross between several things. It's really kind of a cross between a compact sport utility, the Tucson, and a pickup truck. It has an open pickup truck bed. It has 5-seat interior, and then it's got kind of swoopy styling. You could say kind of sports sedan or even sports coupe kind of styling. So just a lot going on there. What's your first take on that whole thing?
I actually like the styling. So I think that, bringing a truck into the kind of car world with the styling, the Ridgeline from Honda did it for a long time. Now it's kind of moving more towards truck styling with its newer updates. But the Santa Cruz, is that right?
Yeah, Santa Cruz.
Yep, is very stylish, and I think it might, at least I hope it will, start to make people realize that you don't need a gigantic truck to get truck things done.
I'm old enough to remember the first just flush of small Japanese pickup trucks in the United States, and through the 1970s and deeply into the 80s. Those vehicles were very, very popular. We see actually kind of the remnants of that in the Nissan Frontier and the Toyota Tacoma. Mazda used to sell a B2000 and then 2300 pickup truck. There were a lot of pickup trucks, smaller pickup trucks than what we see now. The ones we see now are mostly midsize. So I think there is room for this. Of course, this is a four-door that will also hold 5 people. The pickup truck bed isn't all that big. It's only 48 inches long or something around there. They tell me it will indeed hold a 4x8 sheet of plywood. But in some ways, there's a little bit of Chevy El Camino and Ford Ranchero in this thing as well. It's kind of car-like. It's just an interesting mashup, I think.
Yeah, we're going to see another one of these sort of vehicles from Ford with the Maverick in the coming months here, although the Maverick looks a little bit more like a truck, I guess. But really interesting to see how this ends up selling. I can't wait to see how people react to it.
Well, and powertrains are interesting, and I was kind of fascinated by the fact that the powertrains are actually different than in the 2022 Tucson, on which it's based. But it will have two four-cylinder powertrains, four-cylinder engines. One of them's turbocharged. You can get as much as 275 horsepower in the Santa Cruz. So that turns something that's essentially the size of, say, a RAV4 or a Tucson into kind of a hot rod. I would imagine that would be a pretty hot vehicle to drive. And they're pitching this, too, as a vehicle for urbanites, right? Urban people who want to get out in the country, but also are faced with the realities of living in the city and having to park and having small parking places and no garages and all that. So I think it'll be fascinating, as you say, to see how the Santa Cruz does.
Yeah, I mean, I totally buy into the concept and the reasoning behind it. It's all about convincing people or buyers, I guess, that it can do the truck stuff when you want it to, but for every other day, for everyday use, it's just as well as a car, just as good as a car.
Yeah, there's a lot of times I think when an open bed would be useful, right? You have something tall, maybe a piece of furniture, something that won't even go into an SUV, but you could easily drop it down into an open pickup truck bed, even one that's only 48 inches long. So any number of things could be done with the Santa Cruz. I'm really excited to drive it, and I think we will probably do so before the end of the year.
Looking forward to it.
Well, here's a story out of Europe that I thought was fairly interesting. And there is, I guess, more than a rumor. I think it's based on a Reuters story about what's going on in terms of the European Union and their regulations regarding automobiles and emissions. And it looks as if they're going to change the way, by they, I mean European regulators, are going to change the way they look at plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, PHEVs. Up till now, they have been very much in favor of PHEVs. But I think the issue is what they found in the real world. And you know how the real world comes and just slaps us in the face now and then. It's certainly done that over the last 18 months or so. But in the real world, people who buy plug-in hybrids often don't plug them in. And because they don't plug them in, because it's inconvenient or this and that, they don't use them in electric-only mode very much, or certainly less often than the regulators would like them to do. And thus, they're actually spewing more carbon dioxide and nitrous oxides than conventional cars and trucks. And that's because they're heavier, and they're not particularly efficient when they're operated as essentially gasoline-powered vehicles. What do you think about that whole brouhaha?
Yeah, every PHEV I've tested, and it's been probably 5 or 6 now in the past couple of years, came to me with a full battery and then stopping about halfway through the week to fill out the battery. I mean, it's something that I could see a lot of people just missing. And anecdotally, I know a few people who have owned or do own plugins and just don't do it. I mean, I think that it's an inconvenience for people, and you kind of have that. You have the good feeling or the good sentiment when you buy the car, but that kind of fades after the honeymoon period's over with.
Yeah, I think they changed the regulations in China, for example. China, I know, is not in Europe. We're just making that clear that I know that. I think all our listeners know that too. But they have moved away from plug-in hybrids because people just weren't plugging them in. And they didn't give them the tax breaks and other incentives that they were giving to EVs, and they've gone directly to EVs. And I would say when you look at, say, the Chevy Volt and the cancellation of that, the Volt was essentially a PHEV, a plug-in hybrid, to going to the Chevrolet Bolt, a pure EV, well, that's maybe the way the whole market is going to go.
Yeah, I can't blame them. The step between hybrid or the step between gas and EVs is something a lot of people talked about. I think many people are becoming more comfortable with full-on EVs. I've got one coming next week and just did, I always complain about infrastructure here in Maine, but I did some research on it, and it looks like there's some more charging stations being built, so things are getting better even here in the remote Northeast. So I'm all for the switch to EVs and skipping over PHEVs if that's what it takes.
Well, there you go. And I hope they get those built by next week so you'll be able to plug in over there and use that. Well, when we come back, we're going to be road testing some very interesting vehicles. The Ford Bronco Sport, of course, all new for 2021. And Chris has, I think, going to be a fascinating look at that vehicle. And I was driving a 2022 model, the Acura MDX, a 3-row luxury SUV. So stay with us for that with Chris Teague. This is Jack Nerad with you. And stay with us right here on America on the Road. Welcome back, everybody, to America on the Road. Jack Nerad with you, along with Chris Teague. And Chris Teague is going to be leading off this road test segment for us, testing and talking about the all-new 2021 Ford Bronco Sport. You had it in your household for the better part of a week, I think. Chris, tell us all about it.
I did. And I think, the lead in from last segment makes it sound like I'm going to drop a big bomb here. And I don't know that that's going to be the case, but I'll say this just to kind of preface everything else. So I spent the first 3 or 4 days driving the Bronco Sport entirely on the road. It was just not in the cards for me to get out into the woods and have a good time with it. And for the first 3 or 4 days, I was driving it and thinking, it's very quiet, it's very comfortable on the road, it's very comfortable inside, it has room for the kids, room in the back for the dog. But I'm sitting there thinking, what is so special about this thing? It's not jumping off the paper at me. The specs aren't amazing. It doesn't perform amazingly on the road until I drove it off into the mud. And then that's when things really started to make sense for me. And I realized that it's a Bronco and it's meant to go off-road. So you kind of waste it keeping it on road. But that's when things really started making sense and lighting up the light bulbs in my head. So that's really just the bombshell here, is that you really got to get it off the pavement to appreciate what it's all about. So I don't know what you think about that before I get into the rest of this, Jack, but that was my experience.
I think that is a brilliant assessment. In fact, when Ford first showed us the Bronco, and I had a chance to drive it in their company, along with Ford, the first thing they did was put us off-road for a long period of time, and we didn't drive it on road very much. Most of the time we spent with the vehicle was off-road. So I think they were highlighting, as you would if you were a car company trying to show off your new wares, its best side, and that's off-road. So I'm 100% in agreement.
Good. And that's not to say that on-road it's not refined or comfortable at all, because as I said, it definitely was. But Ford sent me the first edition trim. So this was one, the 2000 models were built, and it's sold out. So you can't buy that one now, but it's similar in a bit of ways to the Badlands in terms of the equipment. It's a little bit nicer and has smaller wheels. But in any case, inside, plenty of legroom up front. This one came with the 2-liter turbocharged engine. It's 245 horsepower, 275 pound-feet of torque through an 8-speed automatic transmission to all 4 wheels. As I said, it's got plenty of power, more than enough grunt to get up and go in town, and enough to go through a muddy fire road that runs around behind the outside of where I live. So plenty of power, very smooth powertrain. I actually noticed that it felt even smoother off-road in one of the GOAT modes. I was able to use the mud, I think it's mud and ruts, goes over anything terrain mode. So quite a bit of fun there. This particular trim level had a 10-speaker B&O sound system, an 8-inch infotainment screen, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, kind of the standard stuff with Ford Sync infotainment. We've talked about how colorful and smooth it is many times. This one has, they call it navy pure leather interior. Not quite as upscale or as plush, I guess, as the higher trims of the Ford Escape crossover, but still very nice and comfortable inside. Power sunroof and some really cool Bronco sort of Easter eggs, little pictures printed here and there, and some clever lighting features and everything else. So all in all, as I mentioned, it's a small crossover. It's a little bit more boxy and squared off than a Ford Escape, but it's you really got to get it off-road to appreciate it. But even if you had to drive it on-road every day, I don't think you'd be disappointed.
Yeah. Well, it has a nice compact envelope, right? A nice compact footprint. And at the same time, it holds a lot of stuff. And that's a really good combination, especially if you're going off-road. It's not a bad combination if you live in a city either. But it's a great combination if you're going off-road. And I think it really comes into its own. I would also say I think they've done a very inventive job with the trim levels and putting in the right equipment in those trims to I guess, finish them out for particular types of buyers. And I really think they were smart the way they did that.
I agree with that. And, I was thinking about this too, and you and I may have talked about this before, but the way that Jeep brands its vehicles and the way that it draws in their customers, I think Ford's kind of following that template, and they've done a really good job with branding on the Bronco Sport. You look at the back of it, and the biggest logo back there is Bronco Sport. Ford is a smaller logo off to the side. You get into the vehicle, there's a kicking Bronco on the steering wheel or the rearing Bronco on the steering wheel and graphics, and they've done a really great job with kind of drawing you in to the fact that you bought a Bronco and now you're part of the club. But then they've also done a lot of clever features, right? So you open the lift gate on this first edition model has tiltable LED lighting, so you can aim at the ground or into the back of the vehicle and do a couple of different things. So from a few standpoints, I think they've done a really good job with packaging on the vehicle too.
Couldn't agree more, and I can't wait to drive one again. And that's a good sign when when you do what we do, and we're driving vehicles over and over, a new vehicle every week. To want to get into a vehicle again shows you that you must like it. And I certainly like the Bronco Sport. Sounds like you did too.
Yes.
Well, very cool. Well, I was driving a 2022 model. I think we've maybe driven a couple and talked about them on the show, but this is among the first we're talking about. And this is an important one. It's an important one for Honda and Acura. Of course, the Acura brand is part of the whole Honda sphere. And the MDX has always been a sales leader for them. It's a 3-row SUV, fairly large luxury SUV, even larger and more luxurious this time around. They actually skipped the 2021 model year altogether just to gather their forces for 2022. It has some familiar features like the 3.5-liter naturally aspirated V6 that's been with it for a long, long time, but there is a new 10-speed automatic transmission. That replaces a 9-speed automatic that wasn't especially well liked by many of us. To put it in context, it competes with the longer of the two Lexus RXs. The RX 350L is one of them. There's also a hybrid version. L refers to longer. It's not actually longer wheelbase, but they are longer and a 3-row. And then there are other vehicles. The Lincoln Aviator is another one in that sphere. The MDX isn't as large as the traditional truck-based 3-row luxury SUVs like the Cadillac Escalade, so not a direct competitor, but I think maybe there'll be some cross-shops between those. What they have added to this vehicle is not only size, but also luxury. There was a time when Acura vehicles were very nice, but I wouldn't call them necessarily luxurious. That has changed. They have really upped the level of interior luxury and actually even exterior style. And so it has a very rich-looking interior that can hold up to 7. It has an interesting convertible second row where you can pull out the middle seating position and then turn it into a walk-through, or you can fold down an armrest and essentially get a console, because it's even more than just an armrest folding down. It becomes essentially a console. And they also have flip and fold forward seats that allow fairly easy access into the rear seat. I would not recommend the rear seat for adults for any long period of time. Legroom, I think, is one of the limiting factors back there, but you can certainly carry 7 in this vehicle. It's always struck me, and I want your take on this, Chris, to get an SUV and then only get 6 seating positions. You're only getting one more seating position than in the typical sedan when you go that route. What's your feelings about that?
Yeah, I think, and my family faced this a couple of years ago. We had a Honda Pilot with, I think we had 7 seats, so we had a third row, and we, even with 2 kids, used it once, I think, in the 2 years that we owned the vehicle. So we downsized to a Subaru Outback. I think there's no reason, from my perspective, unless you just really need to carry a lot of gear to suffer the fuel economy and handling and all the other sort of detriments that come along with an SUV, if you want to call it that, unless you absolutely need it.
Well, with the MDX, what you get is a luxury ride. I wouldn't call it super sporty. The engine produces 290 horsepower, which is plenty, but not sports car territory. They're actually going to introduce a higher horsepower version, much sportier, coming up fairly soon. But for the typical family, I think they're going to really enjoy the comfort and the luxury of this vehicle. And I think that's the niche here, or that's where it really stands tall, is the interior luxury, what it offers in terms of features, And then I guess I should talk about the infotainment system before I sign off on here, and specifically the trackpad style interface for the infotainment and for other controls. And it is, I would say, an acquired skill. It's not something that is particularly intuitive, nor is it something that I would recommend you try to learn as you're driving. I actually had a lot of difficulty in the learning experience just sitting still, and I decided to do it that way before I went on the road and tried to do something with it. I think there's going to be some complaints about it. I think, though, when a person owns this vehicle, they're going to come to like it and understand it, and it'll work out for them. So I think just a lot to like with this all-new 22 Acura MDX. Great variety of options in terms of how much you're going to spend and what you get for that, and the fact that all-wheel drive is available, and it's super handling all-wheel drive, SHAWD, that's torque vectoring. Just a lot to like about this vehicle, and I think it's a vehicle that's going to resume its place as one of the tops in the luxury three-row segment.
And I think it should be. I liked the last version of the MDX, and even with the trackpad in the RDX, which I assume is similar to the one that you're speaking of in the MDX, I think it'll be a solid package, and I can't wait to drive one.
Yeah, apparently the interface has been improved since the RDX, and I guess improved is you decide. When something is improved, you have to think, well, why did it need to be improved? But I guess we all could use improvement, and I'm still on a self-improvement track, and I'm decades old now, so there you go. Well, when we come back, and we promise to come back, we're going to take some listener questions. So be ready for that. We're going to try to get ready for that, and we'll be right back with you. With Chris Teague, Jack Nerad with you, right here on America on the Road. Welcome back, everybody, to America on the Road with Chris Teague, Jack Nerad back with you, and it is listener question time. We're happy to take your listener questions. We love to hear them. We love to hear from you, and we thank you so much for being with us. If you like the show, please let others know about us. Pass us along. We like that, and we'd love to talk to others as well. Chris, I think you probably have a listener question for us. What might that be?
I do, and it's seasonally relevant here. The weather's starting to change, at least here. I guess some places it never really went away, but spring is upon us, and people are wondering when or if now is a good time to buy a convertible.
Well, you know how it is, and I grew up in Chicago area, and it struck me that we would have a day, maybe a warmer day in March or April, and heaven knows I've had some below zero days in April in the Chicago area, but you'd have a good day, and all of a sudden you'd see a bunch of convertibles out on the street, and it was exciting, and you'd think, wow, spring is coming, and maybe I should think about buying a convertible. It just seems like an exciting thing to do. And I guess it probably is the best time to go about buying one. Maybe the best time for pricing is to buy one in the dead of winter, with the idea that when spring comes, you will be able to use that, and you won't be competing with everybody who's also thinking the same way you are in the middle of spring. So I would say there's a couple of good reasons to do it, though, in springtime. And one is you can actually drive the vehicle with the top down. I wouldn't try that necessarily in Chicago when it's zero in January. But on a nice spring day, you certainly want to open and close the top in any convertible you buy, whether it's a vintage convertible or even a modern convertible. You want to see what it's like to drive top down. So I guess I'm giving contradictory advice, but I feel somewhat conflicted about this. In terms of pricing, the best time to buy a convertible, I think, is probably in the dead of winter or in the fall when people are thinking, well, I'm done with this. But in terms of enjoyment and to be able to test it, I think the spring is a great time. What's your take on this question, Chris?
Unfortunately, I agree with the contradictory statement. If you're looking to save money, yeah, buy one when everyone's starting to wrap up for the winter. But if you want to get behind the wheel and actually get the experience, it's probably best to do it around now. So I guess it depends on what your goals are. If you can test drive one now and wait until the winter to buy one, maybe that's the best thing to do. Yeah,
absolutely true. And you certainly could do that with a new vehicle. Obviously, a used convertible is going to be probably be sold by the time winter comes around, unless you have a special in with the owner of that vehicle. But certainly having a convertible, I would recommend that everybody drive a convertible at least, several times, maybe not own one necessarily, but if you're on vacation, rent one, spend some time with a convertible. There's just a lot to like about it. It seems like a kind of throwback thing, I guess, these days, but I think they're very enjoyable.
I agree with that.
So there you go. Well, here's a question I have for you, Chris, and we talked more than a lot about the Ford Bronco Sport in an earlier segment, and it kind of begged the question on Ford Bronco itself, the big one, the namesake, that has been promised us, and it always seems like off in the distance a little bit. It's, I'm running to, it's like a dream where you're running toward the goal, but you never can quite reach it. And I guess the question is this: Should somebody wait for the Bronco? Is the Bronco Sport going to be sufficient? Are those so different that one doesn't substitute for the other? What's your take on this?
Well, I think that it's probably a fair statement to say that one does not substitute for the other. The Bronco Sport, even though I just talked about it being great off-road, is not a full-fledged four-wheeler like the big Bronco is or will be. But I will say that if you can wait and you're sold on the big Bronco, then wait. But if you need a vehicle anytime in the next 6 to 8 months, go ahead and get either the Bronco Sport or something else, because, we're past quarter one of 2021 at this point in time, well into the year. Ford still is at least 3 months, hopefully 3 months or less out on the first customer deliveries. And even if you were somehow able to stumble across one on a dealer's lot, you're likely to see some pricing discrepancies there with markups and demand and all that. So, and if you order one now, you're probably going to not get it until 2022. So if you can play the waiting game and you want to wait and you're sold on a Bronco, absolutely. But if you don't need a hardcore off-roader, or if you need a vehicle right away, my recommendation is to look somewhere else. But that's not a knock against the Bronco at all. It's just timing.
Yeah, I love your euphemism there, Chris, the pricing discrepancies. I think what you're saying is...
Trying to be nice.
Yes, the dealers are going to mark these, first ones up pretty significantly because there is such a demand for them. And, of course, that's absolutely their right, and, that's how the free market works. But if somebody... I couldn't agree with you more that if you were to wait another 6 months or 9 months or a year, you might find the pricing to be significantly better, and you'll get into your Bronco and probably be very happy with it. I can't wait to drive one. How about you?
Yeah, I'm looking at a picture of one right now, and every time I look at them, it's like, man, I just wish they would get here so we could drive it.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to that. So that's our listener question segment for this week. Of course, if you want to reach us, just send us a question to editor@drivingtoday.com. That's editor@drivingtoday.com. Of course, our sister website to America on the Road. And when we come back, we're going to be interviewing Mike Darrow. He is the president and CEO of TrueCar. And so we'll talk to him about what's going on new at TrueCar. They're changing things up, I think, for the better. So we'll talk to him right after the break. With Chris Teague, this is Jack Nerad. Thanks so much for being with us right here on America on the Road. Welcome back, everybody, to America on the Road. Jack Nerad back with you, and we have a terrific guest for you right now. Mike Darrow is the president and CEO of TrueCar. You have undoubtedly heard of TrueCar, and we want to bring you up to date on what TrueCar is doing. So, Mike, thanks so much for being with us. We so much appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jack. It's great to talk to you.
Why don't you describe for our listeners? I'm sure many of them have seen your national ads. You've done a lot of advertising through the years. The brand is out there. But I think there's probably still some people who are not exactly certain about what TrueCar is and what TrueCar does. So can you walk us through that first?
Sure, Jack. So, TrueCar is what we describe as a modern day marketplace for automotive. And we sit between consumers who are looking to buy a vehicle and retailers, who are in the marketplace of selling vehicles to consumers. And, the role we play is we help consumers starting with the discovery process, let them find the vehicle they're looking for. They can shop millions of pieces of inventory, both new and used car. And when they find a vehicle of interest or a short list of vehicles, we have a lot of pricing data to help them understand the price, the transactable price of that vehicle. We also give them relevant market data around that pricing to show that it's it's fair or excellent pricing. And then just recently, Jack, with the expansion of digital retailing and the fact that consumers want to do more of the car purchase process online, we've expanded our capabilities. So we now allow a consumer, once they've found a vehicle they like, to calculate a loan or a lease payment, based on their own individual situation. Are they a lease customer? Do they typically finance their vehicle? Do they have a down payment? Those sort of things, so that a consumer can actually calculate, that payment on a vehicle prior to visiting the dealership. And then we've also launched a capability for a consumer to get a guaranteed cash value for their trade. And, when we would talk to consumers, what they would tell us is one of the most or least understood parts of the purchase process was, how does a dealer or someone put a value on their current car? So we've launched a tool, TrueCar Trade, on our site, where consumer gives us their VIN or their license plate number and answers a few questions about their current vehicle, and we can give them a guaranteed cash value for that vehicle prior to visiting the dealership. So, these tools all come together to create transparency for the consumer, and to also shorten the process of, consumers don't want to spend 4, 5, 6 hours on a Saturday or Sunday sitting in a dealership trying to buy a vehicle. And the more of the process they can do online before they go into the dealership really creates efficiency for both the dealer and the consumer, in that car buying process. So, we shorten all of that up to, we want to make car buying easy for consumers. And we think that starts with transparency around pricing and trade valuation for sure.
Well, TrueCar really helped pioneer, I think, transparency in terms of pricing on the new car side. Certainly, that was your calling card early on, and you've now transitioned to the used car side. Tell me a bit about that, Mike, because that's a big, important part of the marketplace these days.
It is, Jack, and as you mentioned, the size of the used car market is typically 3 to 4 times the size of the new car purchases, and new car pricing has been going up quite a bit recently with the transition to trucks and SUVs on the new car side. Pricing of new cars has really gotten up there into the latest transaction price I've seen is over $35,000 for a new car, and I think caused is people are considering used cars who many times thought they were new car buyers. So we've gone through a couple of iterations of this shift to SUVs and pickup trucks. Many of them are coming back to the marketplace now as good used vehicles. And, our dealer partners are excited about their used car business. We oftentimes have over 1 million, up to 1.5 million units of used cars on our site, where a consumer can take a look at them, understand the condition and the mileage and the price of those vehicles, and they're really looking at used cars as a viable alternative to a new car purchase these days.
Absolutely true. Well, Mike, and we're talking with Mike Darrow. He is president and CEO of TrueCar. Walk us through how a consumer that is considering both a new and a used car, maybe a nearly new car, a recent model used car, would use TrueCar, would access TrueCar and use the tools that you offer.
Well, yeah, and that's the interesting part of some of the things we've introduced recently, Jack. We know that 85 to 90% of buyers, new and or used, are payment buyers, right? About 10% of the market ends up being cash buyers. The rest of the folks who are out there buying are looking for some sort of lease or payment option. And we notice a lot of our consumers shopping in that manner. So, they'll look at a new car, they'll build a set of vehicles they're considering on the new car side, calculate payments for those vehicles, and then jump over to the used side of the house and begin to go through the same process. So, you can oftentimes, get a series of late model used cars and then price shop them against the new car vehicles you were looking at. So, our site allows you to jump back and forth. We know a number of folks, up to 60% of the folks in a recent survey tell us they come to the site not completely decided if they're a new or used car buyer. So we make it easy for them to go back and forth between new and used cars, find the type of vehicle that meets their needs, and then allow them to make sure it fits their budget and will be a vehicle that makes sense for them.
Right. Well, price transparency is certainly one part of it, and understanding what the price is, maybe before you're even in contact with the dealer, is pretty valuable to a lot of folks, right? The other part of it is facilitating the deal with the dealer, and I think TrueCar specializes in doing that. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So, when a little over a year ago, when the COVID pandemic hit and dealers were forced, to shut down some of their sales operations and to really adjust the way they did business throughout 2020, we worked with our dealers to allow consumers who are in market, and that's the interesting part about our industry, Jack, and you know this, that there are people every month who need a new vehicle, be that another new vehicle or a used vehicle. Maybe their lease is up, they're tired of repairing their old vehicle. So a number of people out there, regardless of what's going on with the economy or last year when we were dealing with the pandemic, need to service their vehicle needs, and they'll come into our site and look for the vehicle that meets those needs. And because dealer operations in the brick and mortar model were limited because of the pandemic, dealers got more and more participatory and kind of leaned in with us in creating those shopping experiences on understanding pricing, on understanding the value of the trade that a consumer could do at home to minimize the amount of time that they had to spend in the dealership. And many of our dealers, right after the pandemic, we had over 4,000 of our dealers launch a buy from home program with us, so that a consumer could actually, do the full deal online, and the dealer would then deliver the vehicle to their home. So, there was a lot of evolution of our business last year with our retail partners, as the restrictions were out there on what could be done in a face-to-face type environment. So it's really advanced the type of tools you can find on our site and the type of activities that a consumer can perform, so that if they do end up going into a dealership, they're much more prepared and they can really reduce the amount of time they need to spend there.
And I wanted to get into that, so thanks for the transition, because transparency is certainly one aspect of consumer desires. They want to know what the pricing is, and it's kind of a murky area for them because they're not used to negotiating on any kind of prices for pretty much anything these days. So buying a car has some scary moments for them that TrueCar can help get them past. The other thing, though, is the time involved. Nobody wants to burn down an entire Saturday in a car dealership. I think that's about the last thing many of us would like to do. And yet that is the typical process still. Tell a bit, our listeners, how TrueCar can help them speed that whole process along.
Well, we think the foundation of that is, and we see in our research, consumers are spending more and more time online before they go to a dealership. So being prepared, finding the vehicle you're looking for, our site allows a consumer to actually find a VIN or a series of VINs they're interested in that are sitting at a particular dealership.
So those vehicle identification numbers, those are individual cars in the marketplace that are available for purchase, right?
That's right. And we look at a VIN. A VIN is like a social security number for a vehicle. They're individual. And they mark that vehicle as unique, and then carry all the options and equipment that go with that. So, a consumer can find that vehicle on our site, understand the pricing, understand the affordability aspects through payments, and get a value for their trade. And when you have that work done ahead of time, the next step is to make that smooth transition to the retailer. And, we facilitate that with an appointment setting process where a consumer can reach out to the dealer and actually schedule an appointment. And, we've heard from some of our consumers that, they've reduced that in-store process down to close to an hour. And I think that's everyone's goal, is to, do much of your work online so that your time in the store is reduced and efficient. And listen, the dealers do add value to the process at the point of the consumer picking the vehicle up. They can explain to the consumer, how the equipment works, and many of these new vehicles have a lot of electronics that, need to be demonstrated and shown to a consumer. And there's also an opportunity for, the buyer to understand the service department. If it's a new vehicle, oftentimes they're going to go back to the dealership for service. So, we think about an hour to complete that transaction is a great target for us all to set in the industry, and is much more efficient for the consumer, and it makes the dealer's business more efficient. It's not, the salespeople aren't tied up as long, and they can move to service more customers. So there's just a lot of efficiency for both the consumer and the retailer that comes out of that research that happens pre-purchase.
There's wins overall, wins all the way around with that. A lot of people access TrueCar by going onto TrueCar.com or using the TrueCar app, and yet and there are other people who access your service with affinity buying groups. They belong to a particular group, an affinity group, one way or another, and you power a lot of those. Tell us a bit about that, would you, Mike?
Yeah, Jack, thanks for bringing that up. And that's one of the things that really differentiates TrueCar. We have over 250 affinity partnerships. We power nearly 500 different websites with a car buying process. And, we work with some of the biggest brands in the industry, in the world. As a matter of fact, we power American Express, Consumer Reports, Sam's Club, AAA. We most recently added Navy Federal Credit Union to our list of partners. They have over 10 million members and are the largest credit union in the world, and are part of our effort to, serve the military community. So, we're out there creating transparency through all these different sites, and we find, if someone has a relationship or a membership, there's often an affinity that goes with that and a transfer of trust. And we think we can bring elements to the car buying process and lean into that trust. And, our retail partners love the consumers that we get from our different channels. And it really differentiates TrueCar from many of our competitors in the marketplace.
Right. It strikes me there are 3 T's there, right? There's transparency, there is trust, and there's time. And you're helping facilitate the consumer's desires in all 3 of those areas. So strong offering.
Thank you. Yeah. And our affinity, partnerships amount to about 50% of our business. So we kind of have our roots in that part of the business. We really enjoy the opportunity to support some of these really strong brands and household names for consumers. And we think it's important to take the car buying process to where people spend their time. It gives us an omni-channel opportunity to reach consumers. Maybe they're on their personal finance site, maybe they're on one of their membership sites, and they see the opportunity to engage with our buying channel, and we get a lot of positive feedback from consumers on those different channels.
Mike, somebody listening to this and is excited about using TrueCar to buy a new or used car, what's your advice for them quickly?
I think my advice would be is to take your time and do your research ahead of time. There's a lot of great tools and sites out there. We think we're, one of the best as far as helping the consumer find the car they need and really identify the key attributes to make sure it meets all the things they're looking for, and then get into the affordability aspect of the purchase. And that's the really important part. I mean, to do your homework, be prepared, and then when you get connected to a retailer, we pass all of that information. We're one of the, the few sites that when you do work on our site, we pass that work to the retailer so that you don't have to start the deal all over. So, my recommendation would be do your homework, and we'll make it easy for you to get in there and buy the vehicle you want. And, people enjoy buying a new or used car. I mean, they really enjoy having it. And the buying part of that hasn't been as easy and as smooth as we've always liked. And, we think that's come a long way recently. And if you do your work and prepare yourself, it can be a pretty fulfilling experience.
Absolutely. And TrueCar, of course, we're talking with Mike Darrow, and who is president and CEO of TrueCar. So visit TrueCar.com or pick up the app, available in the app stores. Mike, thanks so much for being with us. We really do appreciate it. Thanks for all these great tips on car buying.
Well, Jack, thanks for having me. It's always great talking to you. And we work hard to make this process easy, and we hope the folks who hear this give us a look. And we think we can really create an enjoyable buying experience for them. So thank you.
Well, thanks so much for being with us again, Mike. And stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back right here on America on the Road. And that was our interview with Mike Darrow. He's president and CEO of TrueCar. Obviously, a lot going on at TrueCar that can help you buy a car at the right price. So a pleasure to talk to him. And of course, it's always a pleasure to talk with Chris Teague, our co-host on the show. Just doing what he does in Maine, driving vehicles, evaluating them, just taking a look at the whole automotive industry. Chris, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Jack, and thanks everyone for listening. I will say, if you like what you heard, go ahead and hit like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. That will help us continue to grow and hopefully bring more people along for the ride.
Absolutely. We'd love to have more people join us, join our crew on America on the Road. We'd love that. And also love it if you take a look at my book, The GR Factor, Unleashing the Undeniable Power of the Golden Rule. It is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all over the place. Check that out if you would. And also check out another podcast that we like. In Wheel Time is done by several really nice guys down in Houston, Texas. Of course, they're nationwide, so look for In Wheel Time out there. And also, if you're in the market for some car insurance, or should be, take a look at Mercury Insurance, who helps sponsor the show. So for Chris Teague, I'm going to bid you adieu on this edition of America on the Road. I'm Jack Nerad. Please join us again next time for another edition of America on the Road. If you're looking to save some money, you should switch to Mercury for your auto and home insurance. Californians save an average of $670 with Mercury, so imagine how much you could save. Get a quote today at mercuryinsurance.com.